The country has officially been removed from the Financial Action Task Force's grey list nearly 2 years after being placed under enhanced monitoring for deficiencies in its anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing framework. The decision, announced at the FATF Plenary in Paris, follows extensive reforms and collaboration across government, regulators and the financial sector to strengthen the integrity of South Africa's financial system. Markets have responded positively to the news, viewing it as a major step towards restoring investor confidence and reinforcing South Africa's reputation as a credible and compliant international financial center. Just the implications of being on the grey list, before we talk about exiting the grey list, what was the constraint that it was all causing for South Africa, the South African economy? What was different when we were part of this grey list over the last 2 years versus now as we exit?
Good afternoon to Lasizwe and good afternoon to the viewers all over the world. It is truly an inspiring moment for South Africa. As you were introducing the topic, I was thinking of the times when we celebrate the wins of the likes of our Bokke teams. And this is really a milestone that we should celebrate as a collective. So to your question, what are the constraints? I mean, what we've seen, even in practical terms, it's really about the ease of doing business in South Africa, and South Africans outside of the country being able to, for example, make payments from different countries all over the world. So this actually it's a milestone that helps us to remove actually restrictions that were coming from heightened monitoring as well, but and also more importantly from an investor confidence as well, because what we had was that increased or dilution or risk factor that was built in when the investors were looking at investing in the country. So from a broader perspective, from a global perspective, it's a great win in terms of increased market trust in South Africa as a destination of choice when we look at the foreign direct investment opportunities. So there's quite a lot in relation to what the gains are that are coming through.
Yeah. So give me an example. I'm just imagining you're a corporate, you're involved in a transaction, that involves, I don't know, someone acquiring certain assets in this country or shareholding and the likes, or you're developing a project where there needs to be capital raise and the likes. What were investors doing that symbolized and signaled that enhanced vigilance around a country that is on the grey list?
Yeah, so basically from a risk assessment perspective, so you will find that obviously that was a factor that was investors would actually look at in terms of whether firstly as a country, is South Africa a country that they can invest in, and they will also build in there from a reputation perspective to look at what is the regulatory environment in terms of them being able to do work in South Africa in relation to this. And then also from a financial services perspective, in terms of ease of enabling that, relationship between the investor and South African counterparts as well. There were obviously heightened restrictions in terms of the monitoring status that we had as a country as well. So from a cross-border transactions as well, we found that there were instances where there were delays and an increased cost as well in terms of being able to do business with other countries. And now we're seeing that the removal from the grey list should actually ease off those transactions or rather those restrictions into the future, and it will pave a way for new investments, by foreign investors.
But how did we even land up here, Patricia? Let me ask you. When you and I think about South Africa and the regulation, we think, our financial markets are well regulated. We haven't had any, we've had a few hiccups, but not really collapses of a grand scale in terms of market, regulation and the likes. You and I, we can't open a bank account without having to provide a ton of documents. And sometimes we even say they stop short of asking you for a DNA test and a retina scan. And the likes. You buy a cell phone, you have to go through RICA. So was it a case of us missing some key blind spots? and believing the hype that we are well regulated?
Yeah, to Lesizo, I mean, if we put it in practical terms, in terms of the men in the streets, I mean, we've seen the level of scrutiny that came through, especially from the financial services. That was really directly taking the reforms and putting them into practice, which is really necessary. For example, the requirement of ensuring that we know when it comes to beneficial ownership as to who are the owners behind the different businesses. And when we take it to the element of anti-money laundering, and then also ensuring that we can have interventions in place to prevent the financing of terrorism, as an example, you need to know who are the players behind the scene. And hence, the requirements that came through to ensure that we've got increased monitoring, we've got processes that can enable us to know who are individuals, for example, that we call the PEP, that are politically exposed individuals, for example, that you may be doing business with. So those are the kind of elements that we needed to strengthen as a country to ensure that we can remain trusted and that we've got strong measures in place as well to meet the requirements that FATF was actually reviewing us against. And overall, we had 22 recommendations that were still under implementation, and as we celebrating this win, it means that the broader ecosystem, being the regulator, government, being business, which played a critical role, and the members of our institute, SAICA as an example, that are in various sectors, played a key role in ensuring that the recommendations are put into practice, that we can now today celebrate this win.
Lastly then, how do we build on this momentum? It was almost an all-of-society approach, right? We mentioned the beneficial ownership. A lot of people will tell you about that pressure that came through from the companies and intellectual property, authority that was saying, verify who you are, or else we will discontinue these companies that are dormant. There was all that work that was being done in other sectors as well. So we are here now. How do we maintain the momentum such that we don't land up back in the grey list in a couple of years?
That's a very, very key element to focus on going forward, right? We've overcome the headwinds, and the key thing is how do we ensure that we put measures in place that can ensure that we can sustain the gains that we are celebrating today. And noting that by 2027, FATF will be coming back to review us, and they've changed their criteria. So what is key is to ensure that we continuously invest in strengthening our institutional capabilities, ensure that we've got the right people to, fulfill the requirements of FATF. For example, from the risk requirements, as an example, to ensure that as a country, we remain trusted. And elements such as due diligence requirements, we need to ensure that we strengthen that as well, and that there is the ease of ensuring that when it comes to trade funding and looking at keeping our country risk premium at the desired level, that we're able to put measures in place on a continuous basis that we can sustain this gain. So what is key is that the public-private partnership that I spoke to, that we maintain that we continue to invest in trust, we do our work with integrity, and ensure that there's strong and good governance in various institutions. Right. And more importantly, ensure that we've got an enabling environment when it comes to regulations in our country.
All right, let's leave it there. Thank you for your insights this afternoon. That's Patricia Stock, who is Chief Executive Officer of the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants. Good riddance to the grey list. It's good to be off that list. May we stay off that grey list.